Hey you all, Carpetbagger here, coming to you live from the south, more specifically Atlanta, Georgia, and even more specifically than that, we are at the Center for Puppetry. This is pretty much the world capital of the puppet arts. This is the organization, the world's largest organization that involves puppetry and the use of puppets in film and other performances, and they have a massive puppet museum within these walls. It was opened in 1978, and the ribbon was actually cut by both Jim Henson and Kermit the Frog, and there is quite a bit of Jim Henson's works within the walls of this museum. So I did visit here a couple years ago, but I think it is worth taking a second look. So we're going to go check out the Center for Puppetry. Follow me. As we're entering the Center for Puppetry, I just noticed down here there is a second entrance for very tiny people. It says hashtag Tiny Doors ATL. I wonder if there are other tiny doors in the Atlanta area. Alright, prepare to step within the worlds of puppetry.
Buddy? Where is it?
First we're heading into the Global Collection, where we will presumably see puppets from all over the world. There's an exhibit on one of the most famous and oldest puppets, Punch and Judy. It says Punch is the puppet everyman, is a marionette. He made his first documented appearance in 1662. Here are some versions of the Punch puppet. It's a very spooky ghost puppet. And here are some of the nemesises that Punch the puppet would face. There is a doctor, a crocodile, and a policeman. Punch would even square off against the devil himself. But of course, his longest and most storied rivalry is that with Judy. Here's some other Judy puppets. Quite a beautiful young lady is Judy. Check out these famous puppets. We have Crow and Tom Servo. Of course, these are from Mystery Science Theater 3000, which people like myself who grew up in the 90s may be familiar with. They would actually had a show where they would play an entire movie, an entire B movie or monster movie, and these robots would make fun of the movie while it was happening. Here are some stop motion puppets from Corpse Bride, the kind of the spiritual successor to Nightmare Before Christmas. It wasn't as popular as Nightmare Before Christmas, but really, I always gonna love that Tim Burton look. It says the Santa here was from a stop motion Christmas special in 1968 called A Very Special Christmas. This is an authentic Gumby from 1962. Now I grew up in the 80s, but I really loved Gumby, and I remember I would rent old Gumby shows at the local video store on VHS. And this is the Glob, which was a stop motion villain from one of the episodes of Gumby. Here's some puppet versions of real people, some human-sized puppets. This is Mae West and Carol Channing. I'm not familiar with these. These are some mid-century TV puppets. This guy here in the middle, this marionette, is Clyde. This other marionette here is Foxy the Fox. So, a fox wearing some sort of leisure suit. And this evil little guy is known as Viceroy. And here is a 1960s era puppet made by a Wayland Flowers. It's known as Madam. This is a puppet that would perform adult humor. This is called the Drunken Sailor, although he looks a lot more like a drunken clown. This talks about how in the 1960s puppets were used by some political groups to show their political views. Apparently one of these was the Bread and Puppet Theater in California. And you can see this is called the population puppet. See how its head is made out of all different little people. These puppets are actually from the 1930s. Apparently FDR created something known as the Federal Theater Project, which would employ different entertainers, and puppeteers were hired during this period as it was easy to travel and entertain people with puppets. Here's a Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland. This one is entitled The Green-Faced Girl. These are Mamelengo puppets. So this is a popular political form of puppetry from Brazil. This little guy is known as Pelusin. He is a famous Cuban puppet and has been noted as being the national puppet hero of Cuba. This is known as a limberjack. This particular one is from 1850. I've actually seen these used before. The puppeteer would bounce the wooden plank and cause the puppet here to dance. Now this is Guignol, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but is a French puppet created in 1808 when the puppeteer was actually a dentist who, to attract people to his tooth pulling stand, started putting on puppet shows. Here's some of the other characters. Looks like they have a donkey lady in their shows. There's a little dog man. Here you can see a traditional marionette being constructed, Chivalry. See his head being carved, and then his hands being made with a mold. And this leg there. Some different African puppets. There's a wolf puppet, and you can see the inner workings there, the different wires and bits that would be used to move the puppet. And here is Scar from The Lion King. This is the actual head of Scar used in the Broadway production of The Lion King. Another Lion King puppet. This is Mufasa. There's a big Minotaur puppet. These traditional Japanese puppets. See that one there is what it looks like without his clothes on. This is an Indian puppet with an unknown creator and unknown date of creation. Now that is a fascinating puppet. You can operate these shadow puppets here with these knobs. Yeah, just look how intricate these puppets are. Absolutely amazing. Alright, now we're going to make our way into the Jim Henson section of the museum. It takes you through some of the early works of Jim Henson. It's a show called Sam and Friends. And here's a puppet named Omar from that show. Now, this is one of the longest lasting Muppets. This is Rolf the dog, created for a dog food commercial in 1962, and then moving on to the Jimmy Dean show where he became a popular figure. Now this is pretty cool. This is Jim Henson's office. You can see the frog. Here we enter an area made up to look like Jim Henson's workshop. There's a massive amount of Muppets here that were used in the Muppet Show, including this camel. This is Sherlock Hemlock, a detective puppet from Sesame Street. This is Brad from Sesame Street. And I don't know the backstory of Brad. Someone fill us in if you can, but I'm guessing he may be some sort of relative of Bert. This dog was used in the Storyteller series, and you can see that in the different components used to operate the dog, the equipment there in the back, that cabinet there, it's different shapes, different cutouts, kind of the beginnings of Muppets. You can see hands, that looks like a fish, I think. A little puppet creating workshop here. You see how they would make wire hands on these nail boards. That's actually pretty interesting. And there's like a tackle box full of puppet eyes. You can see the Muppet parts being sewn together there. Look at those eyes. Now, if you have memories of any of these puppets, please share them in the comment section, because I'm not familiar with every one. This is Fozzie Amoeba, said performed in episode 409 of The Muppet Show. This is the little nut tree from Jim Henson's Mother Goose Stories. This blackbird is from Mother Goose Stories as well. And this puppet's from something called The Song of the Cloud Forest. I've not heard of that. And here's King Gosh Posh from Jim Henson's special Hey Cinderella. And here's what will be considered Jim Henson's most memorable contribution to society, and that is Sesame Street. Here we have Bert and Ernie. Looks like they are collecting bottle caps. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing to be able to see these screen-used Muppets up close in person. This is Clementine feeding Fred the Wonder Horse. Of course, Carol Spinney, the puppeteer behind Big Bird, has recently passed away. You can see the iconic Big Bird there. Actually was a puppet. His, you can see right here, he actually put one arm high above his head to work the mouth and eyes of the puppet, and then, you know, his body would be down here, with his legs operating the legs. An absolute marvel of puppetry. Spiney's other iconic character was, of course, Oscar the Grouch. It was really an interesting character for a kid's show. He was a mean guy that lived in the trash, but he was still friends with everyone. Here is the somewhat infamous Elmo. It says here that Elmo actually appeared first as a background character with no name, and later he would grow to be an absolute pop culture phenomenon. I would say as a kid my favorite Muppet was probably this guy right here, Grover. I always remember his Near and Far sketch, where he would exhaustedly run back and forth from the camera. Now, this is interesting. This is Roosevelt Franklin. Says that he was actually retired from Sesame Street because some people felt that his behavior was very stereotypical of certain people. I don't know what stereotype it was, because he's purple, so I don't know if he represents any sort of ethnicity, but I don't know, I haven't necessarily seen him in action. I remember as a kid watching Cookie Monster and viewing him very suspiciously, because it always seemed to me that he just crumpled up those cookies and spit them out, and that he didn't actually swallow them. To me that was very suspicious. This here is a puppet dolly. The puppeteer would sit here and be pushed along the ground, and then you could actually watch the puppet's movements on this TV down here. It's a mock-up of a television studio right here where puppets perform. You can see the TV camera right there. I guess we can help ourselves to some of these puppets. Here is Splurge. This is another character from the Hey Cinderella special. It's T.R. Rooster from Tales from Muppet Land. And then Leroy Donkey. This is Mana Mana, a Muppet created specifically for Nancy Sinatra's stage show in Las Vegas. And apparently that was on in 1971. Of course, classic Muppets here. Scooter. Interestingly enough, this is known as Miss Kitty. This is from the Muppet Show. These are the 7 deadly sins. You see lust here. This is avarice. Looks like it's a cash register spewing money out. Then we have vanity, which is a vanity. That's interesting play on words. And then my favorite 7 deadly sin is sloth. And I think it surprises a lot of people when they hear that Jim Henson had a show called Sex and Violence. You know, he has a rather wholesome image, and that is a very interesting name. He's best known for Sesame Street, of course, but that's actually interesting when you view Jim Henson's career as a whole. He always wanted to create puppets for adults, to make adult shows, adult comedies. And he signed up for Sesame Street. He was actually very leery of doing so because he didn't want to be pigeonholed as a creator of child's television, but kind of ended up pigeonholing him for doing that. His greatest success, Sesame Street, kind of pigeonholed him a little bit. So I feel like he called the show Sex and Violence as almost a way to try to break out of that childish viewpoint that a lot of people saw puppets having. And there's a very good series on YouTube about Jim Henson on Defunct Land. It's a very good YouTube channel, and they kind of cover the whole Jim Henson life story in a very interesting manner. These are from Muppet Treasure Island. You can see the ship here, and then this giant talking tiki face. One of the most famous Muppets, of course, Miss Piggy. I guess this is the version that performed in Muppet Treasure Island. There's another pig puppet named Ron Bohr. I think I was always a little too young to really appreciate the Muppet Show itself, but I do remember this bizarre sketches like pigs in space. Of course, the most famous Muppet, if not puppet of all time, is this Kermit the Frog. And this version here is a photo puppet, so it's used to set up and take still photos with, but just always impressive to be in the presence of Kermit the Frog. The infamous Christmas special, Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. These are Mayor Fox and Gretchen Fox. And here's a remote-controlled rowboat that was used in the special. Here's a film I've not had a chance to see, but I've heard a lot of good things. The Dark Crystal. You can see some very cool props from the Dark Crystal. This is a crystal bat. And then this is the head of Skashad the Treasurer. There's a mock-up of the Crystal Chamber using miniatures to kind of map out how they'd use the puppets. Here's a massive, imposing creature known as Gartham. Here's a dog named Sprocket. He's from the show Fraggle Rock, which I definitely remember from my childhood. These are doozers, little construction worker type creatures from Fraggle Rock. It's a little truck that will be driven by the doozers. You can see that it will be remote control operated by a puppeteer. This is interesting. Doozer body makeup. Not sure why a puppet would need to wear makeup. That's kind of interesting. And here are the Fraggles. Check that out. That's definitely brings back memories. This is Red, Wembley, and Uncle Traveling Matt. But I did see Labyrinth, and I was a huge fan of this when I was a child. You can see some of the amazing puppets from Labyrinth. Here's Sir Didymus. You can see he's riding a saddle there. He rode a dog. Very, very cool. This is Fish Lips. Here's a talking door knocker featured in Labyrinth. Some other puppets from Labyrinth. There's a cannonball. And you notice they have a model, a head cast of Hoggle, but no Hoggle puppet. Now it doesn't actually say right here, but I know why the Hoggle puppet is not here, and that's because after Labyrinth the movie was finished filming, the Hoggle puppet was lost in someone's airline luggage, but you can still see the Hoggle puppet, and I actually featured him in a video of mine. He is at the Unclaimed Baggage Center in northern Alabama, so check that video out while you're at it. Don't really have a good memory of this show. Apparently in 1989, there was a show called Dog City, which I guess was a city populated by human-like dogs. Interesting. I was not aware of this, but the Jim Henson Company actually created commercials for Crystal. Now, for those of you not from the South, Crystal is the southern version of White Castle. They're like tiny little sliders. But check out these puppets. I guess that's just a normal slider. And they just have these little hot dogs, little half-size hot dogs they'd sell. Looks like that is a country fried steak sandwich. And I think that's a chicken sandwich. There's a cheeseburger and some sort of breakfast sandwich there with eggs and sausage on it. Really love this. Now, we saw some Dark Crystal puppets earlier. They actually have an extended temporary Dark Crystal section here. This is the head of a land strider. I guess this would be like a giant creature that walked on 4 stilts. These are Skeksis puppet heads. Shows how they are controlled. This is Jen, one of the main characters of the Dark Crystal. This is a creature known as Augra. Now these are not puppets from the film, they're actually created for a fan film competition. This is Gitch and Tristan the Freeling. There's a creature known as Urek the Scribe. Apparently these are the Pod People slaves. Some of the tiny little creatures featured in the movie. This is a green hedgehog. Here's a male pod person. And this horrifying monstrosity is known as Skekung the Garthia Master. Wow. It's very fun checking back in with the Center of Puppetry and their amazing museum. I can't recommend this place enough. Anyone familiar, especially familiar with Jim Henson's work or fans of Jim Henson's work, an absolute mind-melting experience to come and see all these amazing puppets up close and personal. I really regret that I have not seen the Dark Crystal. I really need to see the Dark Crystal. I absolutely love the artistry and puppets and visual work that was done in the movie. I just need to actually sit down and watch the movie. I have a problem with putting off seeing movies for too long. I will put that on my to-do list to see the Dark Crystal. Appreciate you guys joining me. If you'd like to see other places I've been, please check the interactive map in the description. It'll tell you where I've been, and you can tell me where I should go next. Also, if you'd like to help support the channel, consider buying a t-shirt. Consider donating to Patreon. A $3 more donation will get you a postcard once a month. I'm also now selling pressed pennies in my Etsy shop. But until next time, this one's in the bag.